Hey, welcome. This video we're going to do multiple SSIDs in our CAPsMAN setup. So recently I posted a video where I used CAPsMAN for both the configuration for the remote access point as well as our local built-in one on our HAP. So we're going to do the same thing, but this time, whereas before I used a single network, which on our LAN, so these interfaces, the management for the CAP to the CAPsMAN controller, as well as the SSID that the clients would connect to. So we had single SSID and one flat layer 2 network across everything. So what we're going to do today is the setup is the same here. I've got the same configuration for the WAN, which is just going over my development network. The WAN going over my development network, and all the basic setup is the same in here. The bits I've removed is the LAN and the anything to do with wireless, and then the CAP has been reset. So basically what's going to be different is we're going to use some VLANs. So instead of having this single network here, we will have a out of here we're going to have 3 VLANs all coming on the same same connection, same physical connection, but they're all going to be on a different VLAN ID. So there's our 3 VLANs. We're going to have management. It's going to be on VLAN 10. We're going to have our corporate on VLAN 20, and then we will have our guest on VLAN 30. Okay. Then the SSIDs we're going to have a guest one, which is going to be on VLAN 30, and then we're going to have the corporate, or our standard one. We'll just give it the same name as we did on the other one, and that's going to be on VLAN 20. But then basically the link between these two devices is going to be a trunk. So we're going to have tag traffic on both sides, and then so basically before we had that standard LAN and everything was on that same network, we were going to split it up a bit. So we'll come a bit clearer once we get going. So on the again, as I did on the last video and I've done on another video, we're going to follow this the setup guide for our CAPsMAN using this channels setup that I've got. Easy copy and paste to populate our channels, and then more information on channels on this other article, which again I'll go into briefly. But check out the other video first if you never set up CAPsMAN before. Maybe check out this first one that I've done. There'll be a link in the description below. Basically a single access point deployed both for standalone or CAPsMAN, and then the other video I did where I was basically just using the internal wireless as well, because it's done very differently to how it used to be done on earlier versions of RouterOS. So as I mentioned, this is my HAP. It's pretty much got not a lot on it, just a WAN interface, and we've got some basic firewall and NAT setup. Nothing too fancy, nothing need to worry about really. As you can see, all the Wi-Fi stuff's been cleared, and I have no bridges or LANs set up. So the way you do VLANs in a MikroTik, you actually create a single bridge. Or sorry, the way I should say you used to do it, a simpler way, or the less recommended way now, was you would actually create on your interfaces, you would create a VLAN, and then you would assign that VLAN ID against the actual interface that it was connected on. So if you wanted VLAN 10 on all of these interfaces, you'd have to create one per interface, and then you would create a bridge for those sub interfaces and then group them together that way. There's a lot of, it's not the most efficient way of doing it. It's very quick and easy, but the best way to do it now, and again, click the link here and I'll show you a video on how to do the bridging VLANs, but we'll pretty much cover that in this video as well. So we create a single bridge, which we will just call our LAN bridge, It's going to have all of our LANs within it, or our VLANs in it. Okay. Now we could be going through a switch with this VLAN between our access point, and most likely we would be. But the switch element would just be me showing you how you did it on a generic Cisco, or maybe even a TP-Link or something simple switch. But the concept of the VLANs leaving the MikroTik and entering the cap or the access point are going to be the bits we want to be focusing on. So I've left that element out of it. So for now, there's our LAN bridge. Now, whereas before we would give this LAN an IP address, or this bridge, sorry, an IP address, we're not going to do that in this instance. What we're going to do first, though, is add all of our interfaces into it. So we'll add Ether2, which is what also my machine that I'm on right now is connected to. Ether3, Ether4, and Ether5. Now, Ether5 is the one that's connected to my my AP. So you can see there's those two, that's me, and then that's my AP. So like I did in the last video, I'll just rename this one Cap, so it's obvious. Okay, so now we've got our bridge set up with our interfaces in it. Now what we want to do is we're going to set up our VLANing, our layer 2 VLANing, I should say. So on the VLAN tab, we need to configure our VLANs as we want them. We build out our VLAN table, and then what we're going to do is enable that VLAN filtering option here. And that basically tells the bridge, because you're going to get lots of different traffic coming in from all different networks, but it's then going to filter out the VLAN tag, which will every VLAN frame packet will have a header on it with the VLAN ID, and it will basically be looking for those VLAN IDs and then apply the logic that we set here. But what's very important is that you do this step once you have your VLAN set up and you're confident. Okay, because we haven't configured our cap yet, sorry, our access point. We want to do that knowing that this is all set up and the cap is all set up before we enable it on both sides, so we don't lose access. So first thing first, as I mentioned, we're using VLANs 10, 20, and 30. Now these are going to be tagged on the cap AP, the port. We also need to tag it every time on the LAN. So if we had one of these, we could have one of these rules per VLAN, but I'm just going to do them all in the same one. But we always need to make sure that we've got the LAN bridge, so the bridge tagged as well. Okay. Now what we also need to do is specify on the interface itself under VLAN that we want to admit tagged only, because the port between is going to be a trunk between the access point and the router. We want that traffic to only be talking on tagged VLANs. We don't want any untagged or native VLANs, if you prefer, on that. Basically that means that if this was a switch going into a switch, and then the port that the access point is coming out of is also tagged only, it means then that someone can't just plug into that, to unplug your access point, plug into that and get access to your management network. So you want to keep basically your management separate and isolated from all your other networks, and you also want it to have not the ability for someone just to plug in any port on your switch and then get access to that network. So that's just a best practice. Okay. Ether2 that I'm connected to, I'm going to set myself to be on the management network. So we're going to set that port VLAN ID, because this is effectively going to be an access port, and we can select admit all for this. That'll be fine. But there's the private VLAN, sorry, the port VLAN ID is going to be 10, because I want to be on that management network. Back to our VLANs. So that means also untagged. We want to make sure that Ether2 is going to be on the sorry, no it's not, because that's, cancel that. Okay, so now next thing we're going to do is set up our VLAN interfaces. So when you refer to a VLAN interface, that's a layer 3 interface. So as I mentioned before, bridges, we would often give the IP address directly to the bridge. But this time what we're going to do is similar to the original setup that I mentioned earlier, where you actually assign a VLAN to each interface. We're going to do that same, but we're just going to do it to the bridge itself. So I'll show you. So VLAN 10, we call it management, and we're going to put that as VLAN ID 10, and then stick that on the LAN bridge. So okay, that, as you can see, that's there. Now we're going to do the same. Open that up. What we do is just copy that, call that VLAN 20, and this one was going to be our corporate, and then that was VLAN 20, and then copy it again and just call that VLAN 30, which was our guest. Okay, so they're all sub interfaces of our LAN bridge. Now that means that we can now assign IP addresses to these, because we've got an IP address to assign it to, an interface to assign it to. So we'll go ahead and give our management, can be 10.0.10.1/24, and we stick that on VLAN 10, apply, copy, and we can change that to 20 for VLAN 20. Just make sure if you're copying it, remove this network, and then when you apply it will put the correct one in there for you. And then copy again, 30, and then get rid of that, and then put it on guest. So now we have our VLAN interfaces set up, so our IP addresses for our VLANs. Okay. Now what that means is that when traffic on that particular VLAN comes in, it will be on that same network. So we can go ahead and add some DHCP now to those networks. So normally you often may not have management on DHCP on your management network. It may be just designed for things like switches and servers and stuff, which you want to be statically configured. However, access points, often you would have them dynamically set. You may have DHCP reservations, but more often than not, you may even have a separate network, depending on your size of your network. But for our demonstration, we're going to put DHCP on there, but we're going to make the scope quite small. So just 20. Obviously, we've only got one access point, but let's assume that we only had a few, with a few, space to grow. We'll just give it. We don't really worry about DNS for our management, but we'll give it anyway. And just make that 10 hours. Okay. And let's just do the same then for our corporate. Next. We can just click next for most of these. Yeah, it's got that. We find that scope. 10 hours, and then we'll just do the same for guest. Okay, now we can pretty much look at setting up our Wi-Fi. So we're going to start by setting up our Wi-Fi profiles. We're also going to then configure these local ones, and then I'll show you then how we add the additional SSIDs and sort out the provisioning for our CAP before we deploy it. So we start off with our Datapath, and we're going to give this one, this is going to be our Datapath for our corporate. It's going to go into LAN bridge, but it's going to be on VLAN 20. Now we do one for guest. Bridge. You may remember that if you have watched that other video I mentioned that I recently put up, I didn't do it this way. I actually set the bridge on the interfaces themselves for the local network, but we were just using a single SSID there. So this is a bit different because we got the multiple SSIDs, so we need the different data paths for each, because we're assigning different VLANs. Security, let's add one for corporate. We will give this one. We're going to use just PSKs for both of them. We won't go into too much detail about different ways of. Let's give this one a strong password. and then we'll create one for our guest. Again, just PSK for now. You may want to run hotspot or something else for guest, but that'll be, we'll do another video for that, and then we'll just call this one my nice secure hello world 123. Okay, now channel. This is where I'm going to go back to this website. I won't go into as much detail I've done in other videos about the difference of the channels, but effectively on 2.4 we want to use only 1, 6 and 11, and so we need to know these frequencies here. And for 5 gig we're going to use these 4 here, and then these last 5 here. To easily add those into MikroTik rather than manually adding each one. The reason we add them individually is because it gives us the option to manually set if we ever need to, as well as the preferred option of using a range. But I just have this set here so I can just copy and paste each time. Okay, so then we copy that into Notepad and then just out of the Notepad to remove any weird formatting that may have occurred. Do we just open up a terminal and paste that in? Okay, so we have the ones we're going to use effectively are this range here and then this range here. So now configuration, we're going to build 3 profiles. So the first 2 are going to be for my corporate. So we'll call this corporate 2 gigahertz. And the reason I'm having separate profiles for different frequencies is because I prefer to have separate SSIDs for 2.4 and 5 gig. Because I like to tell my devices what network what frequency they should be using, not the other way around. But then we'll just have a single one for guest, because guests were not too it's too confusing, I think, for people to see 2 different frequencies. They often don't understand the difference if they're not tech savvy. So guests will just have a single one. So we're doing our 2.4 one, aren't we? Yeah, 2 gig. So then we want to select our 2.4 auto. We can leave the rest blank because that's all covered in that channel there, profile there. Security, this is our corporate, so we just use the corporate one there, and our data path is that one. Okay, we can open this up and copy it. And we're just going to change our asset, our name to corp_5 gigahertz. Okay, change that one to be 5 gig. Channel, we want to make sure it's on the 5 gig range, and then the rest is the same. Okay, now we're going to do our final one, which is going to be for our guest, and we'll just call this one guest. 9AP SSID, we'll just call this MikroTik Masters guest. Okay, country, always set the country, and I'm in Australia just because it helps for devices in that same country to be able to connect on the frequencies that you're using. Channel, we can leave channel blank. The reason we're leaving channel blank is because these effectively, this interface, this additional interface we'll add, this additional SSID or wireless interface we add is going to become sub interfaces of these 2. So stuff like channel, you can't have 2 different SSIDs on the same physical hardware that's going to be on different frequencies, because they'll only have a single radio to propagate on. So we can leave that one blank. Security, we can obviously set our guest one, and our data path will be our guest one. And again, like I mentioned, we'll just use this one for that one. So when the guest SSID for the 5 gig one gets created, it will use the channels set under this one, and then the same for the 2.4, use the channels for that one, because the SSID is going to be the same. Okay, so now we can go ahead and enable our configuration for our corporate 5 gig. Wi-Fi 1 is 5 gig, Wi-Fi 2 is 2.4, which again is different to the older RouterOS, where it was the other way around. Wireless 1 was 2.4, wireless 2 was 5 gig. Again, we select our 2.4. Okay, now we enable that. Okay, and as you can see, in my bridge, we have these two dynamically assigned interfaces, which weren't there before. So if I disable that, they'll disappear, and I'll enable them again. And that is because we're using this data path and then telling which bridge to put in. So previously in older versions, you would actually add these two interfaces into your bridge as you would do any of your Ethernet ones, but now it's done dynamically. And then when we look at the VLANs, I'll show you where it assigns that VLAN tag as well. But for the sub interfaces for these ones, we're actually going to add a virtual network. We just tell it which is the master. Okay, Wi-Fi 1, so this is going to be our 5 gig, but we're just going to call that guest, and then data path is going to be guest. Sorry, no, we don't need that, do we? Because I've set this in this configuration, sorry. So we just need to set the guest profile. Okay, and then we add another one. Wi-Fi 2 is going to be our master interface for this one. And configuration is going to be 2.4. There we go. No, it's not. It was going to be guest, wasn't it? Sorry. There we go. There we go. You can see the SSIDs are set there. Now these are going to be sub interfaces of these ones. As you can see, the channels that it's picked are the same, but it has no frequency range to choose from because it's only going to ever do what its parent basically one will do. Okay, and they've also now been added into this bridge. Now what I'm going to do is rename these ones because I like to make it a bit clearer which is which. So this is HAP 5 gigahertz. The Wi-Fi 2 one is going to be my HAP 2 gigahertz. Wi-Fi 3 was the sub interface of 5 gigs, so that's my HAP guest to 5 gigahertz. Okay, and then the same for the last one, the fourth, which is my HAP underscore guest 2 gigahertz. Now all that means is it just gives me a bit more clearer visibility when I'm looking on things like here, and also once I see clients connected to the registration, they'll show up on here under the rather than looking for Wi-Fi 1 and thinking, oh, which one was that, or Wi-Fi 2, whatever. Okay, so we should be ready to, no, we can't test it yet because we haven't enabled our VLANs. So what I'm going to do before we, in fact, we could do that because we haven't actually connected our cap yet. So if we go to bridge, now I'm ready to turn on this bridge filtering. Under VLANs, obviously I've only told it to be tagged on the bridge itself and also the interface to the cap, but this will, in a minute I'll show you once we've enabled that. So you open up this VLAN filtering, private ID, doesn't really matter because we're going to change this to, no we're not, we're going to set this to, we can leave it 1 actually because I'll show you once we do that actually and what we need to do afterwards. So we enable that. Now we go to our VLANs. So as you can see, it's added some private based on our port ID, some default ones if we haven't specified. So as I mentioned before, Ether 2 I've set to its private port VLAN to be 10, so it's automatically added me a untagged one for that. Because we haven't specified anything untagged for our LAN bridge, it's put it on its private, sorry, I keep saying private VLAN, it's port VLAN. So if we go back into here, and under here we change this to only tagged traffic on our bridge, we go back into here and that gets rid of that for us, because we don't ever want anything on VLAN 1, because VLAN 1 is a default and it's a cyber risk, because everyone will always try and access stuff on VLAN 1 first, and if you're running everything on its default, same way if you install a router or something that you haven't changed the password to, the first thing people are going to try is the default passwords for that particular manufacturer. So yeah, never use VLAN 1. So then once we've obviously we're setting our VLAN tags via our Datapath setup, they're not here at the moment, even though they're an interface. But if we look at our bridge ports, they're in here, but they're all got the I for inactive, which is why the same for 4 and 3. So what that means is basically because nothing's connected to them. So they're like an interface that has nothing plugged into them. It's the same principle. So I'm just going to grab my phone and I'm going to connect to guest first of all. So there we go. I'm on 2.4 because I'm slightly further away from the HAP. You can see that's now the I's gone from there. If we look at VLANs, it's added this dynamic one, added by Wi-Fi VLAN 30. So we look at IP DHCP server, and we look at our leases. There we go. So I've been added on VLAN 30. Let's do the same for our MikroTik 5G. As you can see that now that's gone because there's only something now connected to my 5G, and there we go. I've got an active on the 20 range, so VLAN 20. So hopefully it's quite a lot to take in if this is all new to you. But yeah, I recommend checking out some of those other videos as well, and hopefully all together where I go into a bit more detail about either VLANing or the CAPsMAN side, the Wi-Fi side. But yeah, we've effectively now got multiple SSIDs on different VLANs within the same piece of hardware. Now what we're going to do is the challenge is going to be to connect our CAP and then run the same setup. So before we do that, we're just going to log into it. We need to open up Winbox. As I mentioned before, this is completely reset to factory. And in fact, to get onto it, because I've now only tagged traffic going up to the access point itself, I won't actually be getting anywhere on the network I'm on. So what I can do is admit all and set the private VLAN to 10, which is the same network that I'm on. Apply that. Okay, and then when we remove it from its tagged and we change it to untagged, we just remove it altogether, by dynamically it will add it because of that port VLAN. So it's basically turned it into an access port. So now both my links are access ports between the access point and myself. There we go. I can log in. So new password, just set the password. Okay, just log out and log back in again, because then it's not going to ask us for that password any other time. Cool. All right, minimal config on this one. This is going to be, we're going to give it a name. We'll call it under identity. We'll just call it CAP01. We're going to create a bridge, and the bridge is going to work in the very same way for the VLANs. So again, we'll just call this one a LAN bridge. Okay, turn off spanning tree, even though there's no switch in between. Ports, we're going to add our uplinks. So it has 2 uplinks, Ether 1 and Ether 2. We're only using Ether 1, but we'll just add Ether 2 in there anyway. And then we're going to set up our VLANs. So similar way to we did before, we're going to have the VLAN 10, VLAN 20, and VLAN 30. These are going to be tagged on our LAN bridge always, and then we're going to be Ether 1, and we'll stick on Ether 1 and Ether 2. So our physical interfaces. Okay, that. We can go to our ports and again tell them to be tagged only. Okay. Again, doesn't matter about our private VLAN, port VLAN, because it's we said only listening for tagged. So that should be set. Make sure I've got it all right. This is where you want to take the most care, so you don't lock yourself out. Okay, that should be fine. Okay, before we can add an IP to anything, we need to create the actual interface. Now, whereas I did all the different VLANs on the interface, we're only going to have an IP address for this one, or for the management, because we don't need an IP address for all the other networks, because they're only between the route and the clients. So we'll just call this VLAN 10 management. VLAN 10, stick on the bridge. That's the only one we're going to create. And then we can just, on our DHCP sorry, not server, DHCP client, we will get an IP dynamically on that VLAN. Okay. Now we're not going to get anything yet because we haven't enabled that VLAN filtering on the bridge, but it's just there for when we need it. Okay. So now we can look at doing our, in fact, we can, now we've got all that set up, let's go ahead and enable our VLAN filtering. Okay. We're going to tagged only. Okay. We'll just log out of that and then we'll open up a new Winbox. Just make sure we can still see it. Oh, and before we do that, of course, we need to fix our ports, don't we? Because it's currently untagged and we want it to be tagged. So we need to go back into here, add it, that interface is tagged. So our link to our access point is going to be tag traffic. Okay, you can see the untagged bit goes away. I am still untagged, which is fine, that's what I want to be. So now we can go up here and refresh this. There we go, it's picked up its IP address .20 and it's called CAP1. There we go, so that's good. We go into VLANs, current tags, so it's only telling us that those are tagged at the moment because either 2's shut down, or sorry, not shut down, there's nothing plugged into it, and there's no other random dynamically assigned private VLAN IDs 1 anywhere, which is what we want to see. So that's our VLANing setup now between our access point and our router. Now we can sort out our Wi-Fi. Now, as you can see, this looks very similar to what we set up on our router, but we're not going to set anything on here. What we're going to do is just tell these access points to use the configuration on our CAPsMAN. But before we do that, I'm going to jump back on my router and I'm going to show you, and I did demonstrate this in the other video, but I'll just show you the provisioning part of it straight away. And what we're going to do is we're going to create 2 of these provisioning profiles. And now what this does is it tells us, based on some different parameters we can set, but we're going to do it on our supported bands. So anything that's connects that has an AX network card in it, which our CAP does, and the 2.4 AX, we're going to create and enable. So it will create a profile, create an interface, and it will enable it. The master configuration is going to be 5 gig for this one, and 5 gig for this one, 2.4 for this one, and for want of a better name, the slave configuration is going to be guest and guest. And now if we had other SSIDs, such as say IoT or something, we would have created these other configurations and then we would just select it in here. So that's how we have multiple SSIDs. Obviously only no more than 6 for best practice. Okay, so now we can okay that. Now what that means is when these first of all join and they appear in here, they'll apply those parameters we set in there, so these configurations. If you set this after they're in here and you set these, nothing will happen. Even if you turn the AP off and on again, you need to actually remove them from here and then reconnect to the CAPsMAN, and then it will pull it'll only ever do it when it's first provisioning, hence the name provisioning. So now we can go back to our CAP. Now we've got all that sorted. Now all we need to do in here, and the beauty of CAPsMAN is we don't have to do any of this configuration. We need to tell it to connect to our CAPsMAN. It's going to talk on VLAN management. Certificate is going to request, and that's pretty much all we need to set. We can, however, or we need to, however, turn on our CAPsMAN service. So back on our router, back on our CAPsMAN controller, you go to the remote CAP side and click CAPsMAN. You enable it, you tell it to discover access points on the management. Certificate is going to be auto, so it's going to generate these. So when we hit that, there we go, it's made these certificates for us. And then what it's going to do is the access point, then it will request a client certificate, which it will generate and then use that for its communication between the two. So that's why we put request there. Now when we apply that, it should pull there we are, pulls the certificate. Okay, so now we've got our communication between our cap and our CAPsMAN, all we need to now do is tell the interfaces that they are going to be managed by our CAPsMAN. And then we do the same, manager CAPsMAN. There we go. So now, as you can see, we've got our these RMB. These are our two main ones, Wi-Fi 1, Wi-Fi 2. We don't rename them on here because that doesn't have any effect, because the idea is you never log into the cap itself to ever do any troubleshooting or changes, apart from the initial setup or any firmware upgrades. We're going to so we'll leave these just as they are. So Wi-Fi 1 is obviously is the 5 gig, and then 2.4 is the 2. As you can see, that's got those SSIDs, and it's got the channel and everything else in VLAN 10. Sorry, it's talking to the CAPsMAN on VLAN 10. And then the same for the guest. It's now these sub interfaces on those two, very much like we've got set on our HAP. If we go back to our HAP in our Wi-Fi list, there we go. So it's added these in here. You can see the details for everything here, the channels it's picked, the passwords it's got. So our full list now is in here. So we could sort by SSID if we wanted to see all the corporate ones and then all the guest ones. Yeah, so now we can look at our VLANs. Our VLAN is set up. The last thing we need to do on the actual interfaces themselves, just for the two primary ones, the built-in ones, we just need to assign the Datapath, the bridge, just to those two themselves. And that just basically tells it to stick the clients into that bridge. And then the VLAN IDs are being set, so we don't set those on here. We don't set any VLAN information on the actual SSID itself, because obviously these are different between the two. But as you can see, dynamically it's been added 20 and 30. And this has been added from the configuration of these two. Okay, so if I was to change guest to be 40, for example, we'll cancel that. Apply that. So it changes it to 40 there. Obviously 40 is not going to do anything because it doesn't exist anywhere else. So as you can see, so the actual VLAN ID is set on the HAP on the router, the CAPsMAN controller. The only thing we need to do on the CAP side is tell it to use the LAN bridge as its where to put the client traffic. And then because we've got that VLAN filtering I mentioned on earlier, it then treats them as individual VLANs. So you can see Wi-Fi 1 is our main 5 gig one. Wi-Fi 2 is our main 2.4, and they're both on what we're calling the corporate one, which is 20, and then the two sub interfaces 7 and 8 will be on 30, as you can see there. So that's dynamically added, and then it'll also appear now in the bridge here. Okay, so now we can be ready to test. So if we go back on here again, I'm going to go on to registration. Hopefully, because I'm closer to the cap. There we go. Cap 2.4 gig one. There we go, that's me. And then we go to try the guest one. So as you can see, it's Wi-Fi 1 virtual 1. So it's our 5 gig. So although guest only has one SSID name, it's preferred me on the 5 gig, which is good. And then we did 2.4, didn't we? And we did the corporate 5 now. Well, that's jumped me onto the HAP. Let's just try disconnect from that and reconnect. There we go. Okay, I'm in very close proximity to both. They're not obviously in they're set up in a lab testing environment. They're not set up for real world deployment, so they're a little bit close to each other, propagating on full power. So but yeah, hopefully that's clear enough for you. There's a lot to get through. It's a lot of jumping all over the place. I've tried to make it as clear and concise as possible. The idea is I made this based on the other video I did, so the two are kind of very similar in the setup, but it's just a progression from the other one. So the key things here are the VLANings between the VLAN setup between the two, so you need to get your head around the VLAN side of it, and then the way that the profiles work on the controller, and then the minimal configuration we want to do on that access point. Okay. I haven't touched on the firewall side because obviously at the moment we are coming into networks that are on a router and there's no firewalling. I've only got stuff on the input chain. What we would then need to do is we want to block anything between our guest and our corporate, for example. Our guest is also what we would want to do is on our configuration for we want this client isolation ticked. So that means two phones connected on the same SSID can't talk to each other, because the last thing you want is your guest network, someone sitting in your cafe connected to your Wi-Fi, and then you've got someone on the next table that can access their machine if they haven't got very good security on their laptop, for example. They could have a network share going that they haven't properly locked down or are advertising that someone can then just see all the, get all their information from. So you always want to block that at a network level. Okay. But yeah, and again on the firewall, then we would have to do some forward blocking. But that's probably a lot too much to cover in one video. So I do have a firewall video which I did, but that's mainly talking about this input chain. But in my VLAN to VLAN into VLAN networking video I did, which I would recommend you check out if you want to try and get your head around the VLAN side of it, because I go into more detail about the types of VLANs and how that works. In there, I do I focus on the firewall setup for the forward chain, which is what you want to concentrate on. But any questions, any comments, any feedback is always welcome. Please comment below if you have any ideas for videos. If this is something you're looking for and you're struggling with and this video hasn't quite explained it, or your setup is slightly different to this, I'm happy to make one based on your exact requirements, even if it means repeating myself several times. I'm always, my mantra is to make videos that people want to watch or need to watch that can be useful. Feel free to reach out. Happy to help. But if not, I'll say thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.